Chris Stone had always been quiet, an introvert who preferred the company of books and video games over social gatherings. Growing up in Glenwood, Illinois, he was seen as the typical shy kid who struggled to make friends. While he wasn't the most popular, he had a few close friends and was never involved in trouble. His parents, Roger and Linda, were loving but often worried about his loneliness and inability to fit in with his peers. Chris was academically inclined, with dreams of becoming a software developer. Emily Johnson, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Bright, outgoing, and always the center of attention, Emily had a natural charm that drew people to her. She was an excellent student, athlete, and participated in various school activities. Her bubbly personality and generosity made her the most beloved girl in Glenwood High School. Emily came from a well-off family, and she had her future laid out. She was going to attend an Ivy League university and become a lawyer. Despite their differences, Chris and Emily's lives would intersect in ways that no one could have predicted. In their senior year of high school, Chris and Emily were placed in the same advanced biology class. Chris was instantly captivated by Emily, her energy, her confidence, and her beauty. He had always admired her from afar, but now, with her sitting just a few seats away from him, his interest quickly grew into an obsession. Emily, however, barely noticed Chris. She was friendly to everyone, including him, but she had her own life, her own circle of friends, and her high school sweetheart, Jake Donovan, the star quarterback. To her, Chris was just another classmate, a quiet, polite boy who kept to himself. But to Chris, Emily was everything. She was perfection in his eyes, a symbol of everything he wanted but felt he could never have. He spent hours daydreaming about her, imagining what life would be like if they were together. In his mind, they were soulmates, destined to be with each other, even though they had barely exchanged a handful of words. As graduation approached, Chris's obsession deepened. He began following Emily on social media, liking all her posts, and even creating fake profiles to message her anonymously, hoping to get closer to her. He started memorizing her schedule, showing up at places he knew she frequented, like the local coffee shop and library. To him, these encounters were not coincidental, they were signs that their fates were intertwined. By the end of high school, Emily was set to attend Harvard, while Chris had been accepted to a local college. On the surface, it seemed like their lives would diverge, but Chris's obsession didn't end after graduation. In fact, it grew stronger. While Emily moved to Boston to start her new life, Chris stayed behind in Glenwood, where he found a job at a local tech company while taking night classes. He continued to follow Emily's life closely through social media, keeping track of her every move. She had broken up with Jake shortly after starting college, which only fueled Chris's fantasies that he and Emily would eventually be together. He began to believe that it was only a matter of time before Emily realized that he was the one for her. In Chris's mind, they had a connection, one that transcended distance and time. In the summer of 2018, after her second year of college, Emily returned to Glenwood to visit her family. It was supposed to be a quiet, relaxing break from her busy academic life, but for Chris, it was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Chris, now 23, learned through mutual friends that Emily was back in town. He convinced himself that this was the moment he had been waiting for, the time when he would finally confess his feelings to her and make her see that they were meant to be together. On the night of July 3, 2018, Chris saw Emily at a local bar with friends. She was laughing, carefree, and completely unaware of his presence. Gathering his courage, Chris approached her. His heart pounded as he walked up to her, imagining their romantic encounter. He was sure she would be flattered, even grateful, that he had loved her so deeply for so long. But when he introduced himself and awkwardly confessed his feelings, Emily was caught off guard. She smiled politely but quickly became uncomfortable as Chris's words grew more intense. She tried to let him down gently, telling him that while she appreciated his feelings, she wasn't interested. She was seeing someone else. Chris's heart shattered. He had built up this moment in his mind for years, and now, his fantasy was unraveling before his eyes. Emily, the girl he had worshipped from afar, didn't want him. She didn't feel the same connection he had convinced himself existed. He left the bar that night, devastated and humiliated, but his obsession didn't end there. In fact, Emily's rejection only deepened his fixation. Over the next several months, Chris's life spiraled out of control. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily, replaying their encounter at the bar over and over in his mind. He convinced himself that she had been pressured by her friends to reject him, that deep down, she did care for him but was too afraid to admit it. He began sending her messages, hundreds of them. Some were long declarations of love, while others were angry rants accusing her of leading him on. Emily blocked him on all social media platforms, but Chris found ways around it, creating new profiles and continuing to harass her. Emily was scared. She told her family and friends about Chris's behavior, but since they were now living in different cities, she didn't think he was a serious threat. She hoped that with time, he would eventually move on. But Chris wasn't letting go. His obsession turned dark. He began stalking her, driving by her family's house at night, watching her from a distance whenever she came home to visit. He even hacked into her social media accounts to track her conversations and whereabouts. In his mind, Emily had become the only thing that mattered. His obsession consumed him, leading him to believe that if he couldn't have her, no one else should. By March 2019, Emily was preparing to return to Boston after a brief visit home. She had no idea that Chris had been watching her every move. That fateful evening, she was alone at her family's house, packing her things for her flight the next day. At around 7:30 p.m., Chris showed up at the house, uninvited and unannounced. He knocked on the door, and Emily, thinking it was one of her neighbors, opened it. She was shocked to find Chris standing there, looking disheveled and agitated. He pleaded with her to listen to him, to give him a chance, but Emily, terrified, told him to leave. She tried to close the door, but Chris forced his way inside. What happened next was a blur of confusion, fear, and violence. In his twisted mind, Chris believed he was fighting for the love of his life, but in reality, he was driven by an uncontrollable rage. In the heat of the moment, Chris grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Emily multiple times. When the police arrived, alerted by neighbors who heard the commotion, they found Chris sitting on the floor, covered in blood, mumbling incoherently. Emily was pronounced dead at the scene. Chris was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His trial in late 2019 revealed the full extent of his obsession, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Emily's death left the town of Glenwood in shock. How could a quiet, introverted young man become so obsessed that he would take the life of an innocent woman? For Emily's family and friends, there were no answers, only the pain of losing someone they loved so deeply to a senseless act of violence. The story of Chris and Emily serves as a chilling reminder of how unchecked obsession can spiral into dangerous territory. Chris's unrequited love became a deadly fixation, one that ultimately destroyed two lives, Emily's and his own.